The cowboy refused every woman in the county until she asked, "Do you want a wife or just a lonely winter?" Only the sharp tracks of a lone hoverhorse cut through the pristine white, marking the path of a solitary figure moving with confidence and purpose. Jace Calloway, known across the small human colony as the cowboy of the frozen frontier, rode with a calm that could make even the fiercest storms seem ordinary. His brown coat flapped in the wind, and his wide-brimmed hat sat firmly on his head, shielding his eyes from the reflection of the sun on ice. Jace was not just a skilled rider. He was a man of survival, ingenuity, and courage, the kind of human whose presence alone reminded others why humanity had a place in this harsh alien world. Despite his skills, there was one thing the people of the colony had long noticed. Jace refused every proposal from the women of the county. They admired him for his bravery, his charm, and his strength, but he always smiled politely and said no. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it shyness. It was something deeper, something that kept him riding alone, always watching the horizon. Today, like many others, Jace's eyes scanned the horizon for danger. The shardlings, the crystalline creatures that hunted in packs, were never far from human settlements. They moved like glimmering phantoms, sharp and unpredictable, capable of turning a clear path into a deadly trap. Most humans feared them, but Jace had learned their patterns. He could anticipate their moves, outsmart them, and lead them away from the colony. His thoughts wandered to the small village of Frostpoint behind him. Children laughed in the streets, unaware of the icy predators waiting beyond the hills. Farmers worked carefully, tending to their indoor hydroponic gardens, and yet the people always looked to Jace. They knew that, despite his lone nature, he was their protector. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the frozen plains, a distant shimmer caught Jace's eye. At first, he thought it was sunlight reflecting off a patch of ice, but then he saw movement, swift, precise, and deliberate. Shardlings. A pack of 3 moving closer to the village. Jace did not panic. He slowed his hoverhorse and observed. The creatures were curious, testing the edge of human territory. Most would retreat if they sensed a threat, but these 3 seemed bolder, drawn by the scent of life and warmth from Frostpoint. Pulling a small, handcrafted device from his satchel, Jace activated it. It emitted a soft hum, a frequency designed to confuse the shardlings without harming them. The creatures paused, their crystalline forms vibrating slightly as if unsure of the source. Slowly, they retreated, gliding across the ice with eerie grace. Jace exhaled. "That's it for now," he muttered to himself. "Back to safety, little ones." The villagers would never know how close the danger had been. That was the way Jace liked it. They saw him as confident and fearless, but they did not know the hours he spent tracking patterns, studying behavior, or perfecting devices to protect them. It was lonely work, but necessary. As he guided his hoverhorse back toward the village, he thought about the women of Frostpoint. Some were kind, some clever, some funny, and all had tried their luck at winning his heart. Each attempt ended the same way, with a gentle refusal and a polite smile. "Not now," he whispered almost to himself. "Not while there's work to be done." The village came into view, lights twinkling like small beacons in the growing twilight. Children ran to meet him, waving excitedly. Their trust in him warmed his heart, though he never admitted it aloud. Parents nodded in gratitude, and elders gave approving smiles. Yet there was an invisible wall between Jace and anyone else. He had learned to rely only on himself, to trust in his skills and judgment over companionship. He dismounted, patting his hoverhorse's neck. "Good work today," he said softly. The horse whinnied in response, understanding more than anyone might expect. Jace led it to the stable, feeding it carefully before checking the perimeter of the village. Every sensor, every lookout point, every corner of Frostpoint was his responsibility. Later that evening, the villagers gathered around the central fire for stories and warmth. The winter festival was approaching, and excitement buzzed through the cold air. Jace usually avoided such gatherings, preferring solitude and preparation over celebrations. But today, he allowed himself a brief visit. Children rushed to him first, asking about the shardlings. Jace entertained them with a tale of a crystal mountain where shardlings lived, carefully omitting the danger and fear he felt while tracking them. Laughter echoed, snow falling gently on their hair and coats. Nearby, women watched from a distance, smiles tinged with hope and curiosity. Jace caught sight of one, laughing softly with her friends. He nodded politely but kept moving, aware of their gaze. He could sense their questions, their silent challenges, but he remained untouched. "Why do you always refuse, Jace?" A voice whispered behind him, soft but steady. He turned slightly, only to see an older villager shaking her head. "You could have a life here. People would be happy to share it with you." Jace shrugged, looking at the horizon beyond the village. "Happiness comes with time," he said, carefully neutral. "For now, my duty is here. The village comes first." The woman sighed, understanding that arguing would change nothing. Jace always placed the needs of others above himself, a trait admired by some, frustrating to others. Yet it was part of what made him human. He carried courage, resilience, and foresight, qualities that the shardlings could not match, no matter their crystalline strength. As night fell, Jace returned to his cabin at the edge of the village. The small building was simple, functional, and warm. He stoked the fire, brewed a cup of synthetic tea, and examined his equipment. Maps, trackers, and notes filled every available surface. His mind never stopped working, calculating, predicting, and planning. Outside, the wind howled more fiercely, a reminder that Tundra 9 was not forgiving. Inside, Jace allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He remembered stories from the first settlers, tales of humans carving homes in the ice, surviving against impossible odds. Every hardship, every cold winter, every shardling attack had been met with ingenuity and courage. Humans were fragile in appearance, yes, but remarkably capable. That thought always gave him strength. He glanced at the small photo pinned on his wall, a memory of his parents, pioneers who had once guided the first settlers. Their smiles were warm, filled with pride. "I won't let them down," he whispered, feeling a quiet determination settle in him. Sleep came slowly, his mind never fully resting. Dreams were filled with white plains, shimmering crystals, and the silent rhythm of hover horses. Even in sleep, he remained alert, always aware, always prepared. The lone cowboy of Tundra 9 might refuse companionship, but he was never alone in purpose. And somewhere deep in the snow-covered plains, beyond the village lights, the shardling stirred once more. Jace would be ready. The morning sun cast a pale glow across Frostpoint, painting the snow in shades of gold and silver. Smoke rose from chimneys, curling like thin ribbons into the crisp air. The villagers moved with purpose, preparing for the annual winter festival, a celebration of survival, unity, and human resilience. Jace Calloway walked along the main street, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. The village was already alive with activity. Children built snow shelters, laughing as they tested each one for strength. Women hung colorful lanterns that glowed with a soft warmth, and men checked sleds and hover carts, making sure everything would run smoothly. Jace had always avoided these gatherings. He preferred quiet, alone with his hover horse and the open plains. But the winter festival was different. It was not just a party. It was a reminder that humans on Tundra 9 could thrive together, even in the harshest conditions. And this year there was a new sense of excitement in the air. "Morning, Jace," called a young girl, waving as she skated past on a smooth ice track. "Are you coming to the festival tonight?" Jace smiled, tipping his hat. "I might stop by," he said softly. "Duty keeps me busy, but I'll try." The girl's face lit up and she raced ahead, leaving a sparkling trail on the ice. Jace shook his head, walking past stalls that sold roasted tubers, hot beverages, and handcrafted trinkets. Each item reminded him of human creativity, the ability to make comfort and beauty in a world that often seemed cold and unwelcoming. At the village square, preparations were in full swing. A large ice stage had been built, ready for music and storytelling. Children were practicing dances with small bells tied to their wrists, creating a cheerful jingling sound that mixed with laughter and chatter. The festival was more than fun. It was a lesson in cooperation, planning, and tradition, human skills that could survive even on an alien world. As Jace walked, he noticed the women of Frostpoint watching him. Their smiles were polite, hopeful, and sometimes playful. Some waved, others called greetings. Over the years, he had learned to recognize the subtle cues, challenges wrapped in smiles, attempts to draw him into conversation or attention. But Jace remained steadfast. He nodded politely, kept his distance, and focused on the task at hand. There was work to be done, even during a celebration. Safety, preparation, and vigilance were never forgotten. By midday, the festival officially began. Lanterns were lit, and a gentle hum of music filled the square. Villagers moved gracefully across the ice, performing coordinated dances and playful games. Jace watched from the edge, appreciating the energy and coordination. Humans were small and fragile compared to the alien shardlings, yet here they were, dancing, laughing, celebrating, proof that resilience was built not just through strength, but through heart and spirit. A group of women approached, their smiles wide and determined. "Jace," one called, holding a small sled decorated with ribbons. "Would you like to join the race? It's just for fun." Jace shook his head, offering a polite smile. "I'll pass, but I'll cheer you on." They laughed, unbothered by his refusal, and ran off to join the competition. Jace's heart warmed slightly. It was not that he disliked human company. He valued it deeply. But he had always believed that closeness could be a distraction. And yet, as he watched the villagers collaborate, helping each other lift sleds, untangle ropes, and balance on slippery ice, he felt a faint tug of longing he rarely acknowledged. Suddenly, a cry interrupted the festival's cheerful noise. From the hill above the village, a small child had slipped on the ice and was sliding dangerously toward the river that cut through Frostpoint. Without hesitation, Jace sprinted forward, his hoverhorse leaping to his side. The villagers gasped, unsure how he would reach the child in time. Jace slid across the snow, arms outstretched, catching the child just before the icy edge. He lifted the trembling boy, setting him down safely on the snow. The villagers cheered, gratitude shining in their eyes. Mothers and fathers rushed to hug the child, and children clapped for the hero who had saved him. Jace nodded, calm and unshaken, though his heart still beat rapidly from the brief surge of adrenaline. "You're amazing, Jace," the boy exclaimed, eyes wide. "I thought I was going to, I don't know, fall," Jace smiled gently. "Stay careful, little one," he said. "The ice is tricky, but you can handle it if you move slowly and watch closely." The crowd slowly returned to the festival, more lively than before, but something had changed. Even the women who had tried to charm him earlier now looked at him with quiet admiration, not just for his strength, but for his courage and selflessness. As evening approached, lanterns were lit across the village. The soft glow reflected on the ice, creating a magical effect that made the entire square shimmer. Music filled the air, and Jace allowed himself to step closer to the festivities. Children ran past him, spinning in circles and tossing snow gently at each other. Their laughter was contagious, and even Jace couldn't help but grin. Humans were fragile creatures in the vast alien wilderness, yet they found joy and creativity in every moment. That resilience, that spark of life, made them stronger than any crystal predator or frozen storm. A young woman approached, her hair tied in a braid decorated with small lantern charms. She smiled warmly, holding a small wooden flute. "Would you like to hear a song?" she asked, Jace shook his head politely. "I'll listen from here. You play beautifully." The music began, soft at first, then rising with the rhythm of the snow and wind. Jace closed his eyes for a moment, letting the melody remind him why humans could endure, because they could create, celebrate, and hope, even in the harshest conditions. Then, from the edge of the square, a commotion drew his attention. A small group of shardlings had ventured closer, curious about the noise and movement. Unlike previous encounters, these creatures seemed hesitant, almost cautious. The villagers screamed in panic, but Jace remained calm. He knew how to handle this, how to protect the humans without causing harm to the creatures. He activated a small, humming device in his satchel. A soft frequency vibrated through the air, confusing the shardlings just enough to guide them away. They paused, glimmering in the lantern light, then slowly retreated, leaving the village unharmed. The villagers breathed a collective sigh of relief. Children hugged their parents, women thanked Jace profusely, and men clapped him on the shoulder. And yet, he did not linger. Duty was never complete and vigilance required focus. Later, as the festival reached its peak, Jace found a quiet spot overlooking the village. Lanterns twinkled below like a field of stars, and laughter and music drifted up to meet him. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought about the women who had tried to capture his attention, about the children who trusted him, and about the village that depended on him. Perhaps, he mused quietly, there was a balance between solitude and connection, between duty and companionship, between surviving and truly living. The festival continued late into the night. Stories were told, songs were sung, and snow fell gently, covering the village in a soft blanket of white. Humans, small and seemingly fragile, thrived together in a world that was anything but forgiving. They relied on ingenuity, courage, and each other, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Jace remained at the edge, watching, thinking, and learning. He had always believed he needed to face life alone. That attachment could weaken him. But tonight, he saw the beauty of connection, the power of unity, and the strength humans carried in their hearts. And somewhere in the cold, silent plains beyond Frostpoint, the shardlings stirred. But the villagers, guided by Jace's courage and humanity's ingenuity, were ready. For the first time in many winters, Jace allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. Perhaps survival alone was enough. But perhaps, just perhaps, sharing the burden and joy with others could make the human spirit even stronger. The winter festival raged on, lights dancing across the ice, and Jace, the lone cowboy, found a new appreciation for what it meant to be human, not just strong, but united, joyful, and alive. The morning light on Tundra 9 was softer than usual, filtered through high clouds that promised snow later in the day. Jace Calloway was already awake, tending to his hover horse in the small stable at the edge of Frostpoint. The winter festival had left the village alive with laughter and warmth, but Jace's mind remained restless. His nights were often filled with thoughts of patrols, preparations, and the endless plains beyond the settlement. Today, however, the air carried something different, a sense of curiosity and change. A transport shuttle, small and sleek, descended from the sky, its engines making a soft hum over the snow. Villagers gathered at the landing pad, peering upward as the ramp lowered and a lone figure stepped out. Ilara Voss moved with confidence, her boots crunching on the snow, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She was not large or imposing, but her presence demanded attention. There was intelligence in her eyes, determination in her stride, and a faint smile that suggested she knew more than she let on. Jace watched quietly from a distance, his instincts alert. He had seen many arrivals over the years, traders, settlers, scientists, but something about this woman was different. She moved with purpose, yet she observed the village carefully, noting details others might miss. The mayor of Frostpoint approached her, shaking her hand warmly. "Welcome to our little frontier," he said. "You must be Ilara Voss. We've heard about your work. Alara nodded politely. Thank you. I've been following reports of shardling activity near this colony. I believe I can help protect the village, but I'll need assistance from someone who knows the land. The villagers exchanged glances. Many were curious, some excited, and a few worried. Jace, standing at the edge of the crowd, felt a familiar twinge of responsibility. He knew instantly that she would need guidance, and that guidance would likely come from him. Jace, the mayor called, spotting him nearby, I think this is your moment to shine. Alara here needs someone to navigate the plains. Jace stepped forward cautiously, nodding. I'll help, he said simply. Alara turned her sharp eyes on him. You're the lone cowboy, I assume, she asked, her voice steady, curious. I've heard stories. I am, Jace replied. He studied her carefully. She was confident, clever, and unafraid. And you are? I'm someone who believes humans can solve problems together, she said with a faint smile. Not alone, that's why I'm here. Her words struck a chord in Jace, though he did not show it. He had always worked alone, believing that attachment could slow him down, that reliance on others could be dangerous. Yet, there was a hint of truth in her statement, a reminder that humans were not only clever but capable of achieving more together. Alara continued, I've built a device, a shardling repeller. It emits a frequency they dislike. I need someone to help deploy it in the wilds, someone who knows the land, the patterns, and the dangers. Jace nodded. I know the plains, I know the shardlings, I can help you. For a moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Both were humans, clever and resourceful, facing challenges that required courage, intellect, and patience. And yet, Jace sensed something else. Alara's approach was different from anyone he had met. She didn't flinch at danger. She didn't attempt to charm him. Instead, she challenged him with ideas and skills, not flattery or expectation. The villagers watched as the two conversed, curiosity and admiration blending in their eyes. It was unusual to see Jace engaged so openly with someone outside the colony. Usually, he kept to himself, polite but distant. But with Alara, there was an unspoken equality, two humans recognizing the strengths and value in each other. Later that afternoon, Jace led Alara through the village, showing her the key areas where shardlings were known to appear. He pointed out lookout points, patrol paths, and hidden pathways across the ice and snow. Alara listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. You pay attention to every detail, she said, her eyes scanning a ridge where wind had carved intricate patterns in the snow. That's why the village survives. You notice things others might miss. Jace shrugged. Experience. You learn to read the land, read patterns, read the small signs that matter. And yet, she said, looking directly at him, you do all of this alone. Don't you get tired of it? Jace hesitated. It's simpler this way, fewer distractions. Alara tilted her head, considering his words. Then she said something unexpected, blunt and unflinching. Do you want a wife or just a lonely winter? The question stopped Jace in his tracks. He had heard flirtations, polite advances, and challenges before. But this was different. It was direct, honest, and unafraid, not playful, not manipulative, just a question that cut through his carefully maintained walls. He looked at her, unsure how to answer. He had spent years believing that solitude was necessary for survival, that attachment could weaken him. Yet he felt something stir, a faint, unfamiliar warmth that he had long denied. I don't know, he admitted finally, his voice quiet. I've always thought it was better this way, alone, vigilant, responsible. Alara's expression softened. There's nothing wrong with responsibility, she said. But being human isn't just about surviving, it's about living, creating, protecting. And sometimes that means sharing the journey with someone who understands your world. Jace nodded slowly, absorbing her words. There was truth in them, a truth he had not faced before. He had always believed that the frontier demanded isolation, that survival required detachment. But perhaps humans were strongest when they combined courage with trust, ingenuity with companionship. Over the next few days, Jace and Alara prepared for their expedition into the Shardling zones. Together, they packed equipment, checked maps, and calculated safe paths through the icy plains. Jace found himself surprised by how easily they worked together. Her intelligence complemented his experience, and her creativity brought new solutions to challenges he had long accepted as fixed. One evening, as they reviewed the maps inside his cabin, Alara glanced at him with a curious smile. "You're a good teacher," she said. "You notice details others miss. You're cautious yet clever, and you care deeply about these people." Jace chuckled softly. "I do what I can." Alara leaned back, studying him. "And yet you keep everyone at a distance. Even now with me, you're cautious. Why?" Jace hesitated, then admitted, "I've always thought that attachment could make people weaker. If I care too much, I might make mistakes, or someone could get hurt." Alara nodded thoughtfully. "Caring doesn't make you weak. It gives you strength. Humans are clever because they work together, because they protect each other, because they share the burden. You've been strong alone, Jace, but imagine how strong you could be with someone who understands you and stands with you." Jace stayed quiet, considering her words. She was bold, unafraid to challenge him, and yet gentle in her approach. Her logic was clear, simple, and undeniable. Humans were not meant to face challenges in isolation. Survival required skill, yes, but flourishing required trust, partnership, and courage shared. The day before their expedition, the villagers gathered to wish them well. Children presented small charms for protection, women handed warm scarves, and men offered practical advice. Jace accepted their tokens, acknowledging the community with quiet gratitude. Alara stood beside him, her presence calm, confident, and steady. "You'll do fine," she said softly, her hand brushing his shoulder briefly. "The Shardlings won't know what hit them, and neither will we if we do this together." Jace nodded, feeling a small, unfamiliar sense of reassurance. Not just from her words, but from the fact that he was no longer entirely alone. For the first time in many winters, he allowed himself to consider what life could be like with companionship, not as a distraction, but as a source of strength. That night, he looked out over the snow-covered plains, thinking about the future. The horizon was vast, cold, and uncertain, but he no longer felt the same emptiness he had always associated with the frontier. There was someone who challenged him, who believed in human ingenuity and resilience, and who was willing to face danger side by side. The stars glittered above, and for the first time, Jace felt that the frontier was not just a place of duty and survival. It was a place where humans, clever, courageous, and united, could thrive. And perhaps, just perhaps, where they could find connection and warmth, even in the coldest winters. As he finally rested that night, Jace felt a quiet anticipation. The expedition ahead would test their skills, their courage, and their ingenuity. But he no longer feared facing it alone. Humans were strongest together, and with Alara at his side, he was ready to discover just how far they could go. The dawn would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and a new chapter in the story of Frostpoint. And the lone cowboy who had once refused every connection found himself wondering, not with fear but with curiosity, what it meant to live fully, to trust, and to share the journey with another human heart. The morning air was crisp and sharp as Jace and Alara stepped onto the frozen plains beyond Frostpoint. Snow crunched under their boots, and the horizon stretched endlessly, white and sparkling under the pale sun. Every ridge, every icy slope, every shadow could hide the mysterious Shardlings that had haunted the colony for years. Jace led the way, his hover horse gliding silently beside him. The device Alara had designed, a Shardling repeller, was carefully secured to a sled, and she checked its settings repeatedly. Despite the cold, she moved with confidence, her eyes scanning the landscape for signs of danger or weakness in the terrain. "You know these plains better than anyone," she said, her voice calm. I'll follow your lead, Jace nodded. Keep an eye on the sled, it's delicate. And watch the ridges. Shardlings often hide near ice formations. They move fast, but they're cautious around humans. Together, they walked for hours, the silence of the plains broken only by the soft hum of the repeller and the occasional whistle of the wind. As they moved, Jace pointed out subtle signs of past shardling activity, patterns in the ice, broken crystal shards and faint glimmers that indicated a recent presence. They're clever, he said, pausing to examine a ridge. But humans are clever too. Watch closely and you can see what they've done. Then you can stay one step ahead. Alara crouched beside him, inspecting the ice carefully. I see what you mean. The patterns repeat, but not exactly. They adjust, test, retreat. It's like they're learning from us. Exactly, Jace replied. And that's why we have to keep learning from them. They're dangerous only if we ignore the details. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, turning the snow into a dazzling white sea. Jace and Alara paused for a short break, sitting on a ridge that overlooked a valley filled with glimmering ice formations. They shared a simple meal of protein bars and hot tea, the warmth a small comfort in the harsh environment. Alara glanced at him. You know, you work too hard. Even the strongest humans need rest. Jace shook his head with a small smile. The plains don't rest. If you want to protect people, you keep moving, keep observing. Rest comes later. She studied him for a moment, sensing the truth behind his words. You've carried this alone for a long time, she said softly. Maybe it's time someone shares the burden. He looked at her, thinking of her question from weeks before. Do you want a wife or just a lonely winter? He had avoided answering then, but now, amidst the endless white and shared purpose, he felt the question differently. Perhaps companionship wasn't a distraction. Perhaps it was strength. Their reflection was interrupted by a faint glimmer in the valley below. 3 shardlings moved slowly, cautiously, their crystal bodies catching the sunlight. They seemed curious, testing the boundary of their territory. Jace motioned for Alara to stay low. We'll observe first. They'll move closer if we don't act. Alara nodded, adjusting the repeller settings. The device hummed softly, a barely audible tone to human ears but a signal that would make the shardlings hesitate. Jace explained the patterns, where the creatures liked to move, how they reacted to sounds, and the safest path to avoid confrontation while guiding them away from the village. The shardlings paused, tilting and glimmering in response to the device. Slowly they shifted their path, testing the air, then retreating toward a safer area. Alara watched carefully, fascinated. They're responding, she whispered. Your predictions are perfect. Jace smiled faintly. Not perfect, but humans notice details others miss. Observation and patience, that's how we survive here. They continued, moving carefully across the plains, testing different routes and adjusting the repeller. The day passed in a rhythm of observation, calculation, and quiet communication. Every ridge they crossed, every icy crevice they navigated, required teamwork and trust. Jace relied on Alara's scientific knowledge, while she depended on his experience and intuition. Together, they were stronger than either alone. By late afternoon, they reached a canyon that marked the edge of known shardling territory. The walls of the canyon were jagged and crystalline, shimmering in the sunlight. Jace carefully guided the hoverhorse down a narrow path, while Alara secured the repeller and monitored the readings. This is where it gets tricky, Jace said. Shardlings often hide in these crevices. We have to move slowly and watch every shadow. Alara nodded, scanning the canyon carefully. I trust you. Lead the way. They descended, step by step, the cold biting at their faces. The canyon was silent except for the soft hum of the repeller and their careful movements. Then a glimmer caught Jace's eye, a shardling, watching them from a crevice above. He held up a hand, signaling for Alara to wait. Slowly, deliberately, he adjusted the device, sending a subtle signal that encouraged the creature to move away from the path. The shardling hesitated, then shifted, allowing them safe passage. Alara exhaled softly. That was incredible. You're so calm even in front of them. Jace shrugged. Experience. You learn to respect them but not fear them. That's how humans survive. They think, plan, and adapt. They reached the canyon floor, moving carefully through the icy terrain. The light was fading and the cold deepened, but neither of them complained. Together, they felt a sense of purpose stronger than the biting wind or the treacherous ice. After several hours, they found a wide plateau where they could deploy the repeller more permanently. Jace showed Alara how to secure it, explaining the importance of positioning, angle, and timing. She worked efficiently, following his guidance, adjusting the device until it hummed steadily and covered the surrounding territory. There, she said finally, stepping back. That should keep the shardlings away from Frostpoint for a long time. Jay studied the placement, nodding. It's excellent. Humans are clever, Alara. We can adapt to any challenge if we work together. They stood side by side, looking out over the plains. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the snow and ice. For the first time, Jace felt a sense of peace in the open wilderness, a quiet satisfaction that came not from solitude but from shared effort and accomplishment. "Thank you," he said quietly, almost more to himself than to her. Alara smiled, understanding the depth behind his words. "Humans thrive when they trust each other," she said. "You've always protected Frostpoint alone, but now you've let me help. That's strength." Jace glanced at her, a small, rare smile forming. "I'm learning that." Night fell, and they set up a small camp on the plateau. The wind howled softly, but their fire and shared presence kept them warm. They spoke little, content in their cooperation and mutual respect. Jace thought of the question she had asked, "Do you want a wife or just a lonely winter?" and realized it had always been about more than romance. It was about trust, companionship, and the human spirit's ability to thrive through partnership. As they rested, Alara glanced at Jace. "Tomorrow, we check the device and make adjustments if needed. Then we head back to the village." Jace nodded. "Agreed. Humans survive because we think, plan, and work together. Today proved it again." The night was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the repeller and the distant twinkle of stars over the frozen plains. Jace felt a newfound understanding that survival alone was not enough. Humans were clever, resourceful, and strong because they shared courage, knowledge, and heart. Alara slept soundly beside him, and Jace allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The frontier was vast and dangerous, but with partnership, patience, and intelligence, humans could thrive anywhere, even against creatures as strange and cunning as the shardlings. And as the first snowflakes of the evening drifted down, covering the plateau in a soft white blanket, Jace realized that the journey ahead would be easier, richer, and stronger because he was no longer alone. Humans were at their best not just when they survived, but when they worked together, thought together, and shared the adventure of life. The plains were silent, the shardlings kept at bay, and the night sky glimmered above. Together, Jace and Alara were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, proving that human ingenuity, courage, and cooperation could endure even in the coldest, most dangerous worlds. For the first time in many winters, the lone cowboy felt something he had never allowed himself before, a quiet hope that humans were strongest together, and that the frontier was a place not only for survival, but for thriving, learning, and connection. The sun rose slowly over Frostpoint, casting a soft golden glow across the snow-covered village. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint sound of children's laughter drifted on the crisp morning air. The winter festival had passed, leaving behind memories of joy, music, and warmth. But today was different. Today, the villagers awoke to the news that the shardlings had been kept at bay, thanks to the efforts of Jace Calloway and Alara Voss. Jace stood at the edge of the village, his hover horse beside him, looking out over the plains. The ice sparkled in the morning light, untouched and pristine. The shardlings, clever and elusive, had not approached the village for days. The repeller Alara had built, carefully positioned under Jace's guidance, had worked perfectly. Frostpoint was safe. Alara approached him, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "They haven't been near the village since we set up the device," she said with a smile. "It worked," Jace nodded, a rare smile breaking across his face. "It did, and it proves something important. Humans survive because we think, we plan, and we work together. Alone, we can manage. Together, we thrive." Alara glanced at him, her expression softening. "Exactly. And you've done more than survive, Jace. You've protected, guided, and inspired an entire village. That's human ingenuity in action." The villagers began to gather, curious and grateful. Children ran to greet Jace, laughing and tugging at his coat. Parents bowed their heads in thanks, and elders smiled warmly, eyes glinting with pride. The village had always respected Jace, but now there was a deeper admiration, one for his skill, courage, and his willingness to trust and cooperate with Alara. Mayor Harlan stepped forward, clapping his hands. "Today, Frostpoint owes its safety to two remarkable humans," he announced. "Jace Calloway and Alara Voss have shown us that bravery, intelligence, and teamwork can overcome even the most unexpected challenges." The villagers cheered, and Jace felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He had never sought recognition. He had always worked quietly, believing that survival alone was enough. But this, seeing the village safe, seeing the smiles, feeling their trust, reminded him why humans were extraordinary. Not just clever or strong, but compassionate, resourceful, and united. Alara stepped forward, her eyes meeting Jace's. "And it's not just the device," she said. "It's the guidance, the experience, and the courage that made it possible. We succeeded because we combined our skills. Humans are at their best when we trust each other and share the journey." Jace's gaze softened. "I've always believed that independence was strength," he admitted. "But maybe there's a different kind of strength, one that comes from connection, trust, and partnership." She smiled gently. "Exactly. And sometimes the people you trust the most become the ones who help you thrive." For the first time in many winters, Jace allowed himself to consider what life could be like beyond duty and vigilance. Frostpoint was safe. The shardlings were kept at bay. And there was someone beside him, someone who understood, challenged, and complimented him. Perhaps survival alone had been enough, but thriving together, that was something richer, stronger, and more human. As the day unfolded, the villagers prepared a small celebration in honor of the successful expedition. Lanterns were strung across the square, and tables were set with warm food and drinks. Children danced on the ice, and the sound of music filled the air once more. It was not the winter festival. It was something quieter, more intimate, a celebration of ingenuity, courage, and community. Jace and Alara walked through the square together, noticing the small gestures of gratitude from each villager. A child handed them a charm for protection, a mother offered warm tea, and an elder nodded in respect. Every gesture reminded them that humans were resilient not because of physical strength alone, but because of thoughtfulness, collaboration, and care. At one point, a young boy tugged at Jace's sleeve. "Are you going to ride the plains again?" he asked eagerly. Jace knelt down, smiling gently. "Yes, I will, but now I have help, and together we can do more than I ever could alone." The boy's eyes widened. "Really? Together?" Jace nodded. "Together, that's how humans are strongest." Later, when the village square quieted, Alara and Jace stepped to the edge of the plateau, overlooking the plains they had traversed. Snow glittered under the soft light, and the wind whispered across the ice, carrying a sense of calm and accomplishment. "You know," Alara said, breaking the silence, "I asked you a question weeks ago. Do you want a wife or just a lonely winter? I wasn't just asking about companionship." Jace chuckled softly, remembering. "I realize that now. It wasn't just about a partner. It was about trust, teamwork, and allowing yourself to be part of something bigger than survival alone. Alara smiled. Exactly. Humans thrive together, Jace, and you've proven that. But now it's your choice. Do you continue alone, or do you embrace connection and partnership? Jace looked out over the endless white, thinking about the winters he had spent alone, the nights of quiet vigilance, and the countless hours of planning and preparation. He thought about the village, the shardlings kept at bay, and the subtle strength of human ingenuity. And then he looked at Alara, who had proven herself equal in skill, courage, and intelligence. "I choose connection," he said finally, his voice steady. "Not because I need it, but because humans are stronger together. And because sharing the journey makes life richer, fuller, and worth living." Alara's eyes lit up with warmth. "I'm glad to hear that," she said softly. "Humans are clever, brave, and resilient, but they are also at their best when they trust each other. And you've shown what that truly means." Together, they walked back to the village, the wind carrying their laughter and conversation across the snowy plains. The villagers watched them approach, sensing a shift, a quiet, unspoken affirmation that humans were not only surviving, but thriving through ingenuity, courage, and partnership. That evening, Frostpoint gathered around a central fire. Children played nearby, couples held hands, and elders shared stories of past winters and first settlers. Jace and Alara joined the circle, sharing warmth, food, and conversation. They spoke of the plains, the patterns of the shardlings, and the lessons learned from their journey. Every word, every observation, highlighted the ingenuity, resourcefulness, and courage that humans carried within them. As the fire crackled, Jace felt a sense of completion. The frontier was vast, harsh, and challenging, but humans had proven themselves capable of thriving anywhere. Frostpoint was safe, not because one person acted alone, but because humans worked together, observed carefully, and acted thoughtfully. And with partnership, even the most formidable challenges could be faced and overcome. Alara looked at him across the firelight. "You've changed," she said softly. "Not in who you are, but in what you allow yourself to be. That's the true mark of strength." Jace nodded. "And you've reminded me that strength isn't just about surviving. It's about creating, sharing, and thriving with others." The villagers watched the exchange, smiling quietly. In their small, snow-covered world, humans had proven once again that they were clever, brave, and capable. And that night, as the stars twinkled above the plains of Tundra 9, Jace Calloway, the one-sloan cowboy, realized that the frontier was not just a place of survival, but a place of life, learning, connection, and human triumph. Together, he and Alara stood on the edge of the village, looking at the shimmering plains, the distant mountains, and the sky full of stars. For the first time in many winters, Jace understood fully that humans thrived not alone, but together, through ingenuity, courage, and the willingness to trust one another. And in that quiet moment, he knew the future would be brighter. The shardlings might roam the plains, storms might howl across the snow, but Frostpoint, and humanity itself, would endure, thrive, and shine, because humans were clever, brave, and united. The lone cowboy had chosen connection. And in doing so, he had discovered the greatest strength of all, the strength of humanity. The snow fell softly, covering the plains in a blanket of white, while laughter, music, and warmth filled Frostpoint. Humans were not just survivors. They were clever, resilient, and unstoppable when they worked together. And for Jace and Alara, and for the entire village, the winter had become more than a season of cold. It was a season of triumph, hope, and shared purpose, a true testament to the power of human ingenuity and partnership.